It is said that the Epic of Gilgamesh is one of the oldest surviving texts, which is dated to about 1800 BC. The Chins have a book from Confucius dated back to the 2nd century BC. The Rig Veda is older. To my understanding, the surviving text was written on perishable material. It was likely copied. It's dated to about 1500 BC or so. So how can we tell the actual age? By the language, by the material used, or by a special method of dating? So there are multiple ways of seeing, of trying to surmise what is the date of a certain text, or a certain piece of literature. First of all, you look for the oldest hard evidence, written evidence. So I think in the case of the Epic of Gilgamesh, it would be written on clay tablets in cuneiform script. So clay is a hardy material, especially baked clay. It can survive if you keep it in the right conditions for thousands of years. Yeah. There's so many old clay tablets that you find. The treaty between the Mitanni and the Hittites, which is the oldest evidence of Indian gods, Rigvedic gods, Mitra, Varuna, Indra, and so on. That is cuneiform script on clay tablets, right? So, so one of the ways, the first evidence you look for is the hard evidence, hard archaeological evidence. So I'm not sure what is the oldest hard evidence of the Rig Veda. Is the text dated back to 1500 BC? Maybe it is. I'm not sure. Maybe it is. Let's say it is. So in the old days, uh, texts were written on birch bark in northern India, which is now Gandhar, Kashmir, right? So Gandhar is no longer part of India as of today. Kashmir is obviously part of India. So in North India, where you had birch trees and all that, they would write texts on birch bark. They would write texts on various other perishable material, and and we had lots of texts in universities and libraries which were all destroyed. So that's why we've kind of lost the actual hard evidence of how old all of this is. So maybe I'm not sure if this is the correct date, 1500 BC, but let's say it is. Now, it is believed, uh, the mainstream historians, especially colonial historians, have been claiming for the past 150 years or so that the Vedic age dates back to about 1500 BC. That is the chronology of the Aryan invasion myth. Now, how do we actually date the approximate time period of the Rig Veda? So it's not going to be possible to do it based on hard evidence, because the oldest text that we have, written inscription, will be dated to whatever it is, and maybe it's older than that. So one has to do a linguistic analysis to understand, first of all, what is the time period. So for instance, the oldest hard evidence, written evidence of Sanskrit that we have, is found in the Mitanni Hittite region, which is present day Anatolia. Let's put that on the screen. Let's go to the map. So this region here, northern Syria, Anatolia, Turkey, this was the region where 3,500 years ago you had two major kingdoms here. One was the Mitanni kingdom, the other was the Hittite kingdom. Now, the interesting thing about both these kingdoms is that one spoke the Hittite language, one spoke the Hurrian language, which were both local languages, Anatolian languages. But both of these kingdoms had an aristocratic royal class that spoke Vedic Sanskrit. So the royalty spoke Sanskrit, which means that they were locals ruled by an a Sanskrit speaking Indian origin royalty. That's what it was. And we know this for a fact because we found the clay tablets of their peace treaty, in which the gods Indra, Mitra, Varuna, etc. are invoked to witness the treaty and to bless the treaty, to make sure that it succeeds. And you also have a horse training manual by a horse master, the royal horse master of the Mitanni, whose name was Kikuli. So he wrote this horse training manual for training regular horses and making them into war horses, a detailed manual in the Hittite language, in the cuneiform script. But the problem he faced is that there were certain terms that for which there was no equivalent word in the Hittite language, technical terms, scientific terms. So for those technical and scientific terms, he used Sanskrit words because he clearly was proficient in Sanskrit. So these are the oldest written evidences of Sanskrit that we have. Now, this has been known for a century or so, and linguists have done the linguistic analysis of the kind of Sanskrit that is found in all these ancient inscriptions, and it is found that the Sanskrit that is in evidence 3,500 years ago in this region is late Vedic Sanskrit. So it has plenty of words that are found in the Atharva Veda and the later Vedas, but those words are extremely rare or non-existent in the Rig Veda. So the Sanskrit that we have, the vocabulary is very clearly late Vedic Sanskrit. Now, these empires flourished, the Hittite Empire and the Mitanni Empire, they flourished around 1500 BC. And they would, the Indians who migrated to this region would have done so at least 500 years before today. So, before that time. So, they would have reached this region around 2000 BC at the latest, maybe even before that. So, that would tell us that around 2000 BC was the late Vedic period, or maybe before that. And the Rig Vedic period must have been maybe 1000 years, maybe 2000 years, or something like that before that. We don't know for sure. So that is one way of dating the approximate chronology of the Vedas, that the Rig Veda would definitely come before 2000 BC. The other evidence that we have is from the Rig Veda itself, the various mentions of the river Saraswati. It is mentioned as an actual river, not as a mythical figurative river, a literal, actual, physical, geographical river. That's how it's mentioned. It's mentioned as a massive river, as the mother of floods, as a loudly roaring river, and a glorious river, and so on and so forth. And now we know it existed. I mean, nobody can deny it anymore. It's there are plenty of research papers, even in Nature, the most prestigious scientific journal, in which it is now called the Saraswati. It is not even called the Ghaggar Hakra. So it's now clear this river existed. It was the most massive river in India at the time, and it dried out around 1500 BC. It was last in its prime around 6000 BC, and it started declining slowly because of the decline of the Indian monsoon. So it is clear that the Rig Veda would have been written closer to 6000 BC, when the river was last in its prime, and not closer to 1500 BC. So these are approximate ways in which we can date the Vedas, especially the Rig Veda, because the Rig Veda is essentially the starting point of the Vedic age, and you could call it the starting point of Indian civilization. There are events that the Rig Veda mentions and the Puranas mention that would have happened even before the Rig Veda, most likely. But if we consider the Rig Veda to be the starting point of Indian civilization, then it would most likely have been written closer to 6000 BC than to 1500 BC. That's what we can surmise. So we have these various indirect ways of gauging the approximate time period of the Vedas and the Rig Veda, but it's still a work in progress. As you can see, we still don't have a very hard evidence of the exact time period for sure. So right now we have to make do with approximate chronological time periods.